21, you're an Elvis fan. All your life.
Stockport! How are you? What a magnificent theatre. It's so lovely to be with you. My name is Alex Stein. I am a radio broadcaster, DJ, do a bit of TV. I've travelled up from the Isle of Wight today to be here with you, and of course to be with Ginger. Ginger's never been to the UK before. She landed, I believe, yesterday. She went to London. She did loose women. Did anyone see loose women this afternoon? Yeah. Wasn't she fantastic? And then she got in a car. I'm hoping it was a black limo. Someone told me it was a minibus, but I'm hoping it was a black limo. A stretch. I want Ginger in a stretch limo. She deserves that, doesn't she?
Yes.
And yeah, so she's in Stockport. So this is a very, very special night for us. So good evening, Stockport.
Good evening.
Do we have any Elvis fans in tonight?
Yeah.
You are going to have a great night tonight, and we're so thrilled you're here. And I'd like to thank Dave and Neil from Waste Promotions for making this happen. Dave and Neil, the promoters, and I went out to see Ginger in Nashville in January. So I met her there. She's a lovely, lovely lady. You're going to enjoy her stories. We thought we should play her on in fine style, so we made a little video. Would you like to see this video?
Yeah.
Good. I'm pleased about that because it took us ages to make it. So watch the video, then we'll bring Ginger out. Run VT, Richard.
He took my hand and took me into the lounge area of his bedroom, and I sat down in a black chair, and he got down on his knees, and then he asked me, he just said, "I'm asking you, will you marry me?"
This was my beautiful engagement ring that Elvis gave to me on January 26, 1977.
Jerry, you know, if Elvis Presley had lived just 4.5 months longer, Ginger Alden would have been Mrs. Elvis Presley, but that storybook romance was not fated to end that way.
He could take anything ugly and make it sound beautiful.
We laughed, we watched television, we went motorcycle riding.
Millions of women probably envied her.
I shared a love with one of the greatest in the world.
I'd like to say hello to my girlfriend Ginger. Ginger Sunderland. Hello, Ginger. It's not for her.
Ladies and gentlemen, for the first time ever in the UK, please welcome Ginger Alden.
Thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited. I've never been to the United Kingdom.
So, are we treating you well?
Absolutely. Everybody's been super.
And you had a good time on Loose Women?
Yeah, they were great. Really, really nice.
Good. Well, welcome, Ginger. If you've got questions for Ginger, we're going to put a number up. You can text the number and we'll do them in the second half. So if we talk about stuff now and you think, oh, I want to ask about the cars, or I want to ask about Graceland, if you text that, we can deal with it in the questions and answers, which will come in the second half of the show. So, Ginger, you were only about, as a child, 11 miles away from Elvis.
Yes. My parents, we lived in Memphis, Tennessee, and we were fairly close to Graceland. So when I was a child, they used to decorate their homes for Christmas up and down the Whitehaven area, which was right by Graceland, and sometimes we would go and look at the Christmas lights. You know, one row would do, or one maybe block would do all green lights, and somebody else would do all blue. So I passed by Graceland many, many times growing up.
And your dad met Elvis quite early on, didn't he? I don't know how old you would have been at the time. It was early 60s, you probably weren't born.
I was 5. My father was in public relations and recruiting for the Army. And
We've got a photo, we can put a photo up.
That's my dad. That's my dad. And the draft board had made an announcement that Elvis would most likely be drafted. So a lot of people from all the different branches of the military were trying to see if they could get Elvis to enlist. So my father representing the Army, went down. He was told Elvis wasn't in, so he went back. And before my father could come back, Elvis was drafted into the Army. And my father was at Kennedy Veterans Hospital in Memphis when his photo was taken. Because my father was in charge of the recruits, so Elvis came in, and my father stood and talked to him. And at one point, Elvis needed some money to use a pay phone, and he didn't have a dime, so my father loaned him a dime.
And was this photo on your sideboard or your mantelpiece at home during the 60s and 70s, or did you only discover this because of the internet?
This actually was in the newspaper. There's another one too that says you're in the Army now, and Elvis is, father's talking to him, and Elvis is looking up, yeah, the newspaper paper.
And did your dad, when you were a child, did he do what all dads do? Did I ever tell you I met Elvis Presley every time someone came around, or was he a little bit more cooler than that?
I don't know. I mean, we were fans, like I said, growing up, and we loved his music. But yeah, I remember the day this happened. I think he had Elvis sign 2 autographed pictures, one for my brother and one for my sister. And he wrote in my sister's diary, today I shook, I think it was March 24th, 1958. Don't hold me on that. When he put, today I shook the hand of Elvis Presley. And he put that in my sister's book.
And no one could guess that you and Elvis at that time, did you ever feel you were going to meet him growing up? Because he was only just over 10 miles away. And did you maybe get a glimpse of him in a car or see him in a movie and think, one day I'm going to meet the man?
I mean, no, well, I met him when I was 5. I was really young. No, I met him when I was 5, and my father, when Elvis came back from being in the Army for 2 years, my father, being in public relations, was trying to get a few little stories to add to the local paper. And so he became friendly with a guard at the gate, who was an uncle of Elvis's. And so one night, the uncle invited my father. They went to the movie theater. My mother went to the movie theater with Elvis. And my father was sitting there, and he had his Army outfit on, and Elvis walked down the aisle, and he said, "Hey, Sarge, I'm ready to go back to the Army." My dad goes, "We'll be happy to have you back."
What was that for the Army?
So, yeah, that was nice. But then another time we were invited to the Mid-South Fairgrounds, a big amusement park in Memphis, and I loved going there all the time when I was growing up. But I was 5 that night, and my parents got invited to Elvis's uncle, and Elvis used to take a lot of people to the amusement park. And yeah, I remember seeing him. I remember recognizing his face from some photos, from record albums back home. And but he patted me and my sister Terry on our heads, so we were introduced him then. So that was when I was 5.
Right, now let's fast forward to the actual meeting. And you weren't even meant to be in Graceland the evening you met Elvis. It was all to do with your sister, wasn't it?
Yes, my sister was Miss Tennessee, state pageant in 1976, and my other sister Rosemary and I, the 3 of us were home, which was unusual for a Friday night. So the phone rang, and it's a close friend of Elvis's named George Klein. And my mother answered the phone, and she comes in the room, and she said, "George Klein said Elvis is dating around, and he'd like to meet the new Miss Tennessee." And my sister had a boyfriend at the time. There was a young man I'd been seeing for a few months, and the young man was at the house that night. And so my oldest sister, Rosemary, is more bold than my sister Terry and I are. And my sister goes, gets on the phone, and we never really thought of dating. I just thought, and I love my sister Terry, a beautiful lady. I just thought, wow, we're going to finally see the inside of Graceland, meet Elvis maybe, and so, that's it. So my oldest sister said, "See if we can come too." So she wanted, and my sister asked George Klein, and he hesitated, and he must have spoken to Elvis, and I guess, so the 3 of us, my oldest sister was like, well, the worst they could do is send us home with my sister Terry. So George came back, got on the phone, and said, no, that was fine. So we started getting ready, and at one point, my sister Terry, she goes, "I really hope it's okay you guys can come." I knew she wanted us to come. She didn't want to go there by herself that particular night. And so I felt bad about it because it wasn't proper, we weren't invited. So I stopped getting ready. And that's when my oldest sister said, the worst they can ask, or say to us is ask us to leave. So the 3 of us got ready that night, and it was, we were supposed to be at Graceland at 11 o'clock. And it was just a magical time driving down the street, driving past, or getting near to the house that I've driven by so many times. And the gates opened up for us, and we slowly drive up, and then we stopped the car, and because my sister had driven that night. And I remember a guard came out from the side, from the dark. He appears and he taps on the window. And my sister goes, "What do we do?" And he goes, "Try knocking on the front door." And so we're like, okay. So we get out, and at Graceland, those two big lion statues in the front. So we're going, lions and tigers and bears, oh my. And we get up to the front door, and I was extremely shy, so I stepped back, and my sister Rosemary rings the doorbell, and Elvis's friend George Klein answered the door, which I thought was odd because I thought it's Elvis's home. He'll answer the door. So, but George answered the door, and I call it, I said, it's like Alice stepping through the looking glass. I stepped into this rich velvet red carpet, and the whole interior was just, red drapes, and
Yes, Graceland looks very different now to the way it did in 1977. We have got a picture, actually, of Graceland and how it looked in 1977. But this was all the rage. Wow, very rich.
yeah.
And that's how you remember it.
That's how and a lot of people don't know that, but yes, it was the den area, what they call the jumbo room now, that still looks pretty much the same. Some things may have been rearranged a little bit. And the kitchen carpeting had to be replaced, so they found a similar one that looked like it did back then. But yeah, the dining room and the main room, the living room.
Wow.
If
Amazing.
you've been to Graceland, it doesn't look like that.
So you're in there, and are you now pinching yourself, thinking, because the thing is, I think you dealt with this so well, really, because you were so young. Had you been older, it may have been a bigger deal to you, but do you remember pinching yourself, thinking, I can't believe I'm in Elvis's house?
Oh, we couldn't believe, but just stepping in there, and I remember there was a lot of noise coming from the dining room, and you could see people were smoking cigars, and you could see the smoke curling up and playing cards. And there was one of these really tall, high-backed chairs. Maybe can't see, sorry. Maybe you can't see. That was in the dining room. But, we were coming in this way, and the back of the chair was facing, I see the smoke, and I was like, oh, I bet that's Elvis. We're walking up, and but it was a cousin of his. And they were all playing cards there. And so it was interesting because that evening we were taken on a tour by George Klein throughout the house, and we went to the den, and then we ended up going downstairs, and at one point he calls and he says, oh, Elvis, he told us Elvis was practicing karate upstairs, and we were supposed to meet him at 11 o'clock, but so much time was passing, and finally George goes, oh, we can go upstairs, and I thought, I couldn't believe, I thought, we're just going to be in the main, downstairs, and he said something about Elvis's daughter Lisa's bedroom, and I was like, I can't believe this, we're going up to Lisa's bedroom. So we go upstairs, and we go into Lisa's room, and I think a stepbrother of Elvis's came in, and a cousin of his, and they just kept talking. I finally looked at my watch, and it was like 1 in the morning. We've been there 2 hours. We still haven't, there's no Elvis. So I was like, maybe he's changed his mind, maybe something. But all of a sudden, different people would come in and out, and all of a sudden, out of the corner of my eye, I remember this figure, and I turned, I thought it was going to be another cousin or something. And Elvis comes walking in, and he had on like a blue karate top and black pants and boots. And his hair was a little mussed, you didn't see a big pompadour. I thought he was gorgeous. And as shy as I was, I looked up and I go, hi, Elvis. Like, I know him. And he said hi, and he sat in his chair. The three of my sisters and I were sitting on a couch in his daughter Lisa's room. And he sat in a chair, and then he sits down, and he pulls out a cigar, and his cousin leans over and lights it for him. So he sits back, and he was very polite, very gentlemanly. He starts talking to my sister, talking about her pageants, and starts talking to me a little bit. And he was talking to my sister Rosemary, and she said she had never won any pageants. And he goes, well, you'll just have to be misunderstood.
I've got to ask you, I've interviewed about 6 people who've met Elvis, but only briefly. They didn't know him like you did, but they've always said he was more gorgeous in real life than he ever was in the films. And you could feel the electricity. One of them was a comedian by the name of Jimmy Tarbuck, who's back out on the road, by the way. And he was a friend of Tom Jones, and he told me once he was in Vegas, and he had his back to the door, and Elvis walked in. It wasn't because anyone looked up, he could feel the electricity in the room.
It is amazing. It's hard to explain, and you've heard that from a lot of people. But it's true. When he came into a room, you usually knew it. I mean, he would come to my parents later as we began our relationship and seeing each other. And he came to my parents' home a fair amount of times, and he would just come in the door like gangbusters, And he'd want to see my sister. My sister had a bedroom down the hall in our family home, and he would come in and just, where's Rosemary? And he'd walk down the hall and go in her bedroom. And, yeah, he definitely had a magical quality about him. Kind of hard to explain, but that's Elvis.
Yeah, kind of superhuman.
It really was at times. It made you wonder about some things.
And didn't you go around once to your, I'm skipping ahead now, but there's so much I want to ask you, and I know the guys have as well. Didn't you go around once and wanted to watch the TV, and you went into your sister's bedroom, and you turned it on, and you went black and white?
He did it. Yeah, my oldest sister Rosemary had a black and white television set, and he came down the hall, and he looked, and he goes, that's a black and white TV. Like, you need a color TV. And she was like, oh, I'm fine with the black and white. I don't know how much time passed. He must have been on the phone earlier. And there's a knock on the door, and one of his aides is standing there with the color television. So they replaced it, and she got a color TV.
So you have this lovely night at Graceland, and then you go on, so it's the second date when you go flying to Vegas?
Yes.
Right, okay, we've got a picture of the Lisa Marie plane. So you were really taken by surprise by this, weren't you?
Yeah. Actually, I was on a small plane. I was on the Lockheed Jetstar. But I spent a lot of time traveling. I was on this plane a lot for all the tours.
So you were on the... Okay, Richard, we need a picture of the Jetstar for tomorrow night, okay?
It was a smaller plane. I had no idea he had planes. But yeah, I was invited, well, long story, but the second night I was invited back. Elvis was watching television. He was wearing like a blue, I call it like a flight suit, looked like a little jumpsuit you zip up. And he had this big black jeweled belt on. And I walked in the bedroom, he was sitting on the bed, and he stood up, he smiled at me, and he walks over to the TV, turns it off, and he goes, you know, television destroys the art of conversation. But I thought, if you knew Elvis, there was a TV in every room, two, I believe, over his bed. And I thought, you know, that was just a funny statement. But yeah, that night we talked, he sang on an electric organ in the room for me personally, and it was great. And he started talking about cars that he owned. And he was telling me about a Ferrari he had called it the Black Mamba, because I named it after the fastest snake in the world. And then he went in talking about a Stutz Blackhawk he had. And at one point, he said something about going for a ride to see his airplane. And I was like, oh, hey. And so on the way over, his cousin went with us, some bodyguard. And on the way over, I think Elvis said, let's fly over Memphis. And his cousin said, let's fly over Nashville, something like that. So I would come pulling in, and the small Lockheed Jetstar parked at Memphis Aero, those private area for the private planes. And the stairs are down, the lights are on, so I go inside, I'm introduced to the pilot, and Elvis's cousins were with us, a couple of bodyguards. I sit down in a chair in the back, and all of a sudden Elvis goes, oh, I forgot something. And he jumps up, and two of the bodyguards scurry away with him, so I'm left on the plane by myself, talking to it. You know, this was just an innocent date night, I suppose. And all of a sudden, a little while passes, and Elvis comes back, and sits down, the door closes, and he goes, I got pajamas for everyone, we're all going to Las Vegas. And I'd never been out west before, so I was really petrified. I remember thinking, the plane is taxiing. He didn't say, is it okay at first? And I was thinking, I've got to call my mom. I got to tell my mother what's going on. And he asked me if it was all right later, and I thought, what do you tell him? Stop the plane?
So were your parents cool with it? Because obviously he was the world's biggest star, and he lived in a completely different world. Were they okay with it? And by the way, how was your sister when you got that
I
date?
said, we're super close, yeah. She was, well, I have to back up here now again.
That's okay.
The first night, yeah, I have to really back up here for a minute. Yeah, the first night when we met Elvis and when he was talking to us, and that particular evening, he played the electric organ for us. He was always quite the gentleman. He took us on a tour through his bedroom and showing that. Next thing we know, we end up in his dressing area, I called his closet. And he was showing us jumpsuits and all this. And I always thought a closet is a private thing for especially someone you just met. But it was kind of like that was his persona. It's like, this is me here. These are the jumpsuits and how beautiful they were and all this. So my sisters and I are standing there, and Elvis walks back toward his bedroom. And he calls for George Klein to follow. This is the first night. And George goes back, and all of a sudden George comes out and goes, Ginger, Elvis would like to see you. And I looked at my sisters, and I was like, what? we're looking at each other, and so I kind of timidly follow in, and I walk in Elvis's bedroom and through his bathroom, and he's sitting on the bed like this, and he goes, like for me to sit down next to him. So I sit down, and he goes, "Did you know I was paying more attention to you than to your sisters?" And I thought he'd been pretty responsive to all of us, but then I started thinking back when we were walking down the hall. I had a Pepsi Cola in my hand, and he took it from me and took a drink. And I started going the wrong way down the stairs, and he put his hands on my shoulders and guided me back. So I thought of that, and I said, well, yeah, kind of like, you know. And then he said to me, he goes, I'm not that street out there. He goes, if you cut me, I bleed. And the street was Elvis Presley Boulevard. And wow, I thought that's a powerful statement to make. And then it went into, I don't like one-night stands. And I was like, good, I don't like one-night stands. It was a whole, but that was the first night, and I ended up reading the first night in bed with him. It was an amazing thing to think you're with this rock and roll superstar, and he wants to read. And he read all these books on Eastern philosophy. He was just fascinated with that. And
was that a bit heavy for you? Did you think, I'm not really in this, but...
Well, no, it was interesting. It was just different. It was hard for me. I can't sit and say I understood it right off the bat. And I remember that first night, he picked up a giant book. It was supposed to represent God, this man sitting on a throne with fire and rain and all these little symbols at his side. The man had a long beard, and Elvis is reading from it, and I'm sitting next to him. All of a sudden, he goes like this and hands me the book and wants me to read to him. And I was very nervous. I was like, he's watching me. If I make a mistake. But that first night, getting back to this with my sister, at a point, I sat there all night with him reading that first night. It was like 6 in the morning. And I said, I need to go meet up with my sisters and go home. And he goes, oh, they've already left. And I was like, wow, I've been here by myself. And obviously, George Klein had said to them that Elvis was going to stay with me for a little bit. If they wanted to stay, they could. And I think they were taken on tour of the different rooms, I think the racquetball court and all that. So they had gone home, unbeknownst to me. So Elvis had someone send me home, and he said, I heard him say on the phone, be sure and get her number. And then he asked me for my number. He pulled next to his night table, he got out a matchbook and wrote my number down. And
Elvis Presley writes your number.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And so, yeah, and I left that night, but when we got home, you were asking about my sister. Yeah, I mean, the family was...
So how pissed off was your sister?
No, she actually, they couldn't believe it. I mean, I was so exhausted then, but, and I was just relaying the reading and all this. And everything was fine. I mean, I went to sleep, and that's when the next afternoon, I didn't know if Elvis would call me or not. And the next afternoon, I got a phone call. But no, my sister, we're super close.
That's lovely. And how understanding of your sister. So let's get back to the plane. So you're flying down to Vegas. This is crazy. Are you thinking now, what next?
Oh yeah. Well, Vegas, I remember when we landed and we were picked up. We had a Dr. Guy named Elias Guy, who was a doctor of his in Las Vegas, and he met us at the airport, and I was just mesmerized, all the lights, But we ended up going to the Hilton Hotel, and his cousin, I think it was his cousin Patsy Gamble, her husband Gigi, and they were with us. And we just sat in the room and talked a little bit. At one point, his cousins left, and I remember, I thought maybe we'd be going out. We're in Las Vegas or something, and all of a sudden Elvis goes into the bathroom and comes out wearing pajamas. And I was a little nervous then. I was like, okay, what's in store? But then he says, here's some for you. So I go in the bathroom and I put on pajamas and I came out, and it was just, I was really uncomfortable with it at the time. But I think at some point I told him I needed to call my mom. And he got on the phone with her. I did call, and he said, I'm taking very good care of her. So I said, Mom, I'm in Las Vegas. And it was just supposed to be an innocent night in Memphis.
Did you say, I'm in Las Vegas with Elvis, and he's got his pajamas on?
No, I
Mum didn't get to hear that.
No.
So, were your parents cool with it?
When he got on the phone, and it was so, I always remember this, if people have heard Elvis talking, sometimes he stuttered a little bit. And that always touched my heart, because when he first actually met him, when he was meeting my parents later and everything, he was nervous. And he would start to stutter a little bit. But no, my parents, they trusted him then. But he, like I said, he got on the phone, he spoke to my mom, and and that was okay. And we didn't stay long. I thought sometimes that's just his way of unwinding, just to take a break and go here, because we flew back like the next day.
We've got lots of photos to look at tonight, Ginger, and I've got my favourite Ginger photograph up here. See what you think of this. There's two here. It's this one here behind you. And you just, well, you always look gorgeous, but I love this photo. And you've got a very special necklace on, TLC. So whatever happened to that? You got one tonight? Look at that, ladies and gentlemen. These pictures, you're just so gorgeous.
Well, it wasn't, it's just an amazing time.
And the fashions, did you love the fashions of the 70s?
I did, yeah. I love the look, everything. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah. They're just absolutely brilliant. Got loads more pictures. So you're at Graceland, you're hanging out in Graceland, it's 1977, and most of it was just upstairs reading and watching a bit of TV in Elvis's bedroom, wasn't it? But that wasn't just like any bedroom.
No, I mean, his bed was like 9 feet by 9 feet. It was a huge bed. But Elvis, I didn't go, I feel so sorry for him, and I thought, I didn't feel that with him during our time together in his last months. I call it his sanctuary, whether it was his bathroom, his dressing area, that was like a private place for him. He had, his grandmother lived downstairs, he had an Aunt Delta that lived, was living downstairs. And I think he just enjoyed the privacy. He had everything he wanted up there. There was an electric organ in his office that he played a great deal. And he would go on that. But, with Elvis, you just never knew. If all of a sudden you wanted to go somewhere, you went. Or, he had three-wheelers and motorcycles. And you just didn't know when he was going to say, let's go do this, spur of the moment.
And do you think so much time was spent upstairs because he was never really sure who was downstairs and he might not be in the mood for seeing a lot of people?
I came to feel that, yeah. I think one time he asked, one of his stepbrothers had a girl, and he a girl downstairs, and he said, who's downstairs? And I said, so-and-so. And he said, I don't want to go down then. And that bothered me a little bit, but I thought, but it was, it was okay. I didn't feel him feeling so sad that it was his home, that he couldn't.
Most people would say, especially stars, get him out of the house, I'm coming down.
Well, he liked to be dressed nice, yeah. And if he was in his pajamas, which he sat in a lot, because of these beautiful stage suits, the studs on the back created scars on his back. And I knew that hurt him, so when he was off tour a lot, he wore pajamas, I couldn't blame him, And if you see a lot of pictures of him on a motorcycle, I always get tickled because I can tell he's got I can see the blue pajamas underneath the motorcycle, whatever he's wearing. He's still got those pajamas on.
So tell me, you watch TV, and he was a bit of a fan of Happy Days, the Fonz.
Yeah. He loved comedies. I said he loved Happy Days. He loved there were some shows you may not be familiar with. You said Good Times. A lot of it was 1970s. There was a show called Barney Miller about police officers.
We had Barney Miller.
Oh, do you?
Anybody remember Barney Miller?
Yeah.
Well, we had it down south.
Yeah, the character I even know that. I remember he said to me, he thought it was so funny because he just looks disgusted with the world all the time. I don't know why he thought that was funny, but he did. But yeah, he loved good comedies. We all know he loved the Pink Panther films. He would mimic Peter Sellers so many times. He introduced me to those. The Spy Who Loved Me, we watched that.
Yeah, because that was out, summer 77,
Yeah,
and we went
that
to the
was-
cinema to see.
Yeah, that was fun.
To see that. Did I believe you were at home with him one day, the TV was on. This is a great story. It's a short story, it's a great story. And an Elvis movie comes on.
Oh yes. And we started watching a little bit of the Elvis movie, and he got up after a little bit, and he just turns the channel, and he goes, same story, different location. And I didn't know at the time, later you started hearing he wanted to do this and that, and he wasn't that happy back. This was before I met him, with his acting, maybe Colonel Parker stifled him from doing more serious films. But that was something he did tell me during our relationship, that he hoped to do more serious films. But we didn't sit and watch it long, but he watched it a little bit. I can't remember which one it was.
Well, my favourite was Change of Habit with Mary Tyler.
Yeah, wasn't that his last name?
It was his last kind of film as a character, wasn't it? Did he ever talk much business with you? Did he ever talk about the Colonel, or when the Colonel came round, was there a different atmosphere?
Yeah, I always felt his relationship with Colonel Parker during my time, what I saw was mainly business. Sometimes he wouldn't be completely happy with it, you know, he would say, he would get mad sometimes, we'd be on tour and he would say he's picked, I think the venue was farther away because the Colonel wanted better food, something with the food, and he got mad one time about, you know, when we were on tour. And I think when I first saw the Colonel, there was like a pot of food. He had a big chef's hat on. It was stirring, it seemed like he had this pot, kind of stirring this pot. And I mean, he was polite. He was nice to me, but I would give them privacy and they would talk business. And then I believe when the Colonel's wife was ill, we were in Palm Springs later in January, and Elvis took me to the Colonel's house and to see because his wife was ill. And I stayed in one room and while I went back and visited and came back out. But I remember I saw all of these elephants in the front yard of the Colonel Parker's house. And when he initially opened the door, I said, "Oh, why do you have all these elephants?" And he said, "Because an elephant never forgets." And he said, "I want Elvis to get me an elephant ring." I don't think Elvis ever did. But
I love the story you told me when we were at Nashville. You told me the story about Way Down. So Way Down was released in the summer of 1977, as I'm sure you all know, big #1 over here. And Elvis hadn't really done that many rock and roll records for a couple of years, lots of love songs. And he comes in and he's quite excited with Way Down. I don't know if he had the acetate of it or just a 45 single.
I'm thinking, yeah. I just remember he put it on the record players. Well, I guess we do know. But yeah, he had his cousin and his cousin's wife came upstairs in her bedroom, and Elvis put it on and started singing along with it. And this was so great. But when he was lip syncing, you know, and he would kind of sing along, and then the Way Down part, he would point to me or point to his cousin. He wanted us to hit those. So he was really having a good time.
The really low notes
Yeah.
that JV's.
Oh yeah, the Way Down. You know, this. So that was a lot of fun seeing him.
Yeah, great record too.
Yeah,
good
good
song.
song.
So you're with Elvis when Moody Blue is his current album, his last album. Did you have the album already? Did you ever end up buying the album? Did he give you a copy of the album?
You know, I don't think I did. I don't think I have that.
So you go out with Elvis and you didn't have
I
Moody
know.
Blue. Someone buy Ginger a copy of Moody Blue. We're going to look at some pictures of some cars now, Ginger. Elvis was always very, very generous. So here we've got a picture of you in that green Triumph, and behind the Triumph is a couple of other cars which I believe Elvis bought you, the two-tone.
Yes, funny story with the white Continental Cadillac Seville. When I first I joined Elvis for his last, what would unfortunately be his last Las Vegas engagement, and while we were in Las Vegas together, this was in December of '76. One night he said, "If you were me and going to get a new car, what would you get?" I didn't know. I didn't even own a car, but I said, "Well, I think I said a Cadillac or a Lincoln, something. The Lincoln would be nice." He said, "Well, what color?" And I think I said blue or something or white. And then he goes, "Thank you." He goes, "I've just been thinking about getting a new car lately." And after one of his shows, instead of going back up to the suite, I started following him, and a lot of people were with us, and we go out through the back, and I walk out, and that white Continental was sitting outside, and Elvis looks at me and goes, "It's yours." And the whole time he had told me he was trying to get a car for himself, and I couldn't believe it. But the funny story with that car is when we came back from Las Vegas, and we came off tour, and when we were home, Elvis had my mother on the telephone, and he was talking to her, and he said, "What kind of car do you drive?" And my mother goes, "I think it was a Dodge Charger my family had." And Elvis goes, "That's your family car?" And my mother goes, "Yes." So he chatted with my mother a little bit. They were talking about the Bible, something in the Bible that they were talking about. And all of a sudden, he hangs up with my mom, and he goes, he wants to give that car that he'd just given me to my parents. And he said, "I have another car for you." And I hadn't even driven the car yet. So the only time I drove the car was to drive home to give to my parents. But Elvis did end up giving me the Cadillac. He said it was a car that he had bought for his father, and his father, he said, didn't have any use for it. He ended up buying his father a truck. So he gave me the Cadillac Seville that had been his dad's.
So that's a two-tone Cadillac Seville, and that car was at the Bewley Motor Museum in England a couple of years ago. Did you keep it for long? What was it?
I had it for a while. People were asking, oh, how could you do this, sell this car or auction this? And I said, you can't keep up cars. It's hard when you travel. I couldn't begin to keep up this car, so that's interesting. And the smaller car, the TR6 I loved. I had that for a long time. That was just a surprise in, I think it was in July. It was about 6 weeks before he passed away. So that was a complete surprise.
You had trouble getting it down the drive because
I did.
we call them a manual, you call them a stick shift.
Stick shift.
You'd never driven one before.
No. So I jumped in.
So the time frame is you're with Elvis up until August 77. So you meet him in the late December, I suppose, November.
Oh, when we met? Yeah, November 19th.
So,
yeah.
so November to August, it's 9 months. And it's so intense, and you're 20 years old. You must think about it all the time, because you live, in those 9 months, you probably squeezed in about 3 years of life.
That's always the way I try to explain to people. Some people will go 9 months isn't long, and I said, well, if you're expecting a child, it is. But for me, Elvis wanted me to know so much about him, and it did. It seemed more like a few years. It was so intense, so quickly, and so much involved that I just came to a place where I couldn't imagine him not in my life, because it's just a powerhouse that took over in our life.
It's easy to live in Elvis's world with the Memphis Mafia around him, and I guess you were younger, so it was easy, but there must have been pressures within Graceland.
It's kind of interesting. When we were upstairs, we were alone a fair amount, which was good. And he would, like I said, there was an electric organ, he would go play. So we had a chance to, we read a great deal, but it was when we were on tour, that's when things would pick up. And I understood that, certainly. But Elvis was very guarded with me, so I didn't get a chance to get to know a lot of the people around me.
So you get engaged in January 77?
January 26th.
Did you see it coming?
No. The two of us had been sitting in Elvis's daughter Lisa's bedroom, and at one point he got up and he went into his bedroom, and he was gone for a little while, and I started going, okay, it's unusual, he's gone for a bit. So I stood up and I walked in, he was on the phone. So I came back and started watching TV in his daughter's room, and after a while, he comes walking back in, and because I heard all this commotion, different people were coming up and down the stairs. He takes me by the hand, and we leave his daughter's bed, cut through the dressing area of his bathroom. Again, his bathroom's a sanctuary for him. And there was a black chair in front of a window, and he took my hand and he has me sit down, and he just started saying, really beautiful, I've loved before, I've never been in love, I've been 60%, I'd be 40, never did I think I'd find it in my own backyard. And he gets on bended knee and says, I'm asking you to marry me, and he pulls this beautiful green velvet, and the ring was, I'm stuttering, trying to say about the ring, beautiful. It was magnificent.
It's not actually that big in real life, is it? But it's nearly that big, isn't it?
Yeah, it's gorgeous. And I did not know until after he passed away that stone had been taken from a famous ring he wore on stage a lot. It's his TCB ring that he loved. And he let the jeweler take it out because I didn't know all going on behind the scenes that he had called the jeweler and said, I want a ring for Ginger tonight. And the jeweler said, I don't have a stone this big. And then the jeweler suggested it. And Elvis said, come get the ring. And they never replaced it. It's still got a CZ stone.
Wow. And he was, because I've read your book, Ginger, and it's a very good book, available at the back if you haven't got it. You say in the book that he was so proud, he kept saying, show me your ring, show me your ring.
He did. After we got engaged, we stepped out, and I believe his friend Charlie Hodge was there, I think his cousin Billy, and they congratulated us, and Charlie gave me a little small backgammon game, which I didn't know how to play, but it was like a little engagement gift. And Elvis and I sat back in the bed, and he kept going, hold up your hand. Hold it, it looks like a headlight. Hold up your hand. And then he had his aunt come up, a couple of the maids come up, and then after a little while, he took us down to his grandmother. And I remember saying, oh, I hope you have a little boy. She made the comment, and she seemed happy about it. And then we ended up going to his father's house. We cut through the pasture in the backyard, and then in the back went to his father had a house close by. And his father hugged us, but I got the feeling his father, obviously, he had already said something to his dad about it. I didn't think he was that surprised. And then we waited a little while and went to my family, and that was a surprise. Yeah.
Before we talk about your mum and dad and your sisters and what they thought about it, as fans, we think we know it all. We read the books, we listen to the songs, we watch the documentaries and the films and all of that. And what I've picked up on Vernon, Alice's dad, was he was, I think, a kind man, but quite cold. But he was of that generation. Was he generous to you? Was he warm?
He was always nice. Well, I used to hear stories, if you said, oh, when do you want this done, he would have said yesterday, that if he worked for him. But I didn't really, I was intimidated by him. That's just who I was. I was shy around him, and I wanted him to like me. But Elvis would tell me some things that made me feel good. One time he said when his father was in the room, he said, it's like his father hates to leave, or did you notice this, or his father. And, but I would give them privacy a lot. If his dad came up and talked, I didn't want to sit in there if they had some business to talk. But one time Elvis told me, he said, my daddy said it's the first time he saw the little boy put overalls on back in these two below since we've been going down. I took that as a compliment. I thought, wow, but all those little things were making me feel. Because me trying to, Elvis would tell me, you have to feel like you're the lady of the house. You have to do this and that. And, he wanted me to feel comfortable, but I always said feeling comfortable for me was like trying to feel comfortable like Graceland in the White House at the time. I just needed more time, which unfortunately, I felt more comfortable as time went on, but not to the point, unfortunately, I didn't.
I just thought you are rock and roll's first lady.
Well, I don't know.
There's a title for your next book.
There we go.
So you go back and you see your mum and dad and you've got the ring. Does Elvis go back with you to show them the ring, or do you go?
No, he went. I remember he said, show them the ring, and they had no idea. They congratulated us, my sisters were there, they came out. I think it was just something that was very surreal. It just, no way else to explain it at the time. But they were happy, as long as I was happy. They were.
Let's rewind a bit now, because that's January, and I need to back up a little bit here. Christmas at Graceland with Elvis. Tell me he got his Elvis Christmas album on and put it on.
Oh, that would have been nice. It was a quiet Christmas. We had just come off of a tour, and I remember the tree was already up. We came in the house, and we would have come off of, I believe, it was another tour that we come off of. But I remember Christmas just being super quiet. On Christmas Eve, he had given me a beautiful gift, a necklace, a bracelet. I didn't know what to give him. I had purchased a tiger eye cross necklace that I found, and but he had given me my gift. I believe it was Christmas Eve, and I wasn't prepared. I thought Christmas Day, and I remember I left him on Christmas Day and went to my family's real quick. And when I came back, I gave him that necklace, and he wore it on during some shows. But the clasp broke, unfortunately, and we just never got around to with so much going on to getting it fixed. But there are some photos of him wearing the necklace I got.
And you never moved in with them officially, did you? You would stay over, then you would go home. Was that because of the times you lived in, or was that because you didn't feel right for your parents, which I guess is the same
He
thing?
did. Early on, he asked me if I'd like to move in, and I said, I know there are a lot of women that are going to not like this answer, but I just said it wasn't my way then. And people will say, well, you traveled with him, you did this. I said, I know, but it was just for me at the time. I was still sharing a room with my sister at our home. And, but he said, I respect you for that. And, especially in the very beginning, but as time went on, I began to stay more and more, and I would go home to get clothing, or change clothing, and come back. And, like I said, it was just kind of an escalation of me starting to stay there more and more and more. But I never left. It wasn't like I wasn't there for 3 or 4 days or a week or anything.
And didn't Elvis want your family to move closer to Graceland?
Yeah, he started talking about a house. This became a constant thing during his tours later. He wanted my parents to have a house closer to Graceland. Everybody knows his generosity. He bought housekeepers and then bought homes. And it was, I don't know, it was an amazing gift. And my parents, it was very awkward. They actually didn't look for homes. And Elvis kept bringing it up. about different tours we'd be on. He kept bringing it up to me. He goes, have they found a home yet? And I was like, well, no, and I kept having to bring in finally, and my parents unfortunately didn't have a great relationship, and so they were going through issues of their own. And at one point I just had to tell him that my father had moved out. And I knew that would bother Elvis. He was very family oriented, and anyway, but he started saying, well, he wanted to still, get a house for my mom. We even looked, he went with us one time to look for a house, but he said, no, it needs a pool. He wanted to have a pool.
So you go house hunting with Elvis Presley?
Yeah.
Wow, how rock and roll is that? I bet the realtor couldn't believe it, could they?
Oh, I know. I mean, and I forget, we looked at, I just remember this one house, but he was going, no, it needs a pool. And it was older, it was an older house. But eventually he said to my mom, after that, when my dad had moved out, and he said to my mom, because he had always said, you don't need a house note hanging over your head, you should be able to relax and play golf if you want. But he ended up telling my mom that he wanted, because my mother told him generally looked at houses, and she said, well, we're fine, the house, they had recently just purchased the house that we were living in. And then he said, okay, he said he'd like to buy that house for her then. And it was a house she was already in. So that was super, that was wonderful that he wanted to do that.
So you're touring a lot with Elvis. We've got some pictures. First of all, we've got some pictures of you arriving, looking gorgeous, may I say, with Elvis Presley here. Look at this coat. This coat's fantastic.
Yeah,
did you find it hard keeping up with Elvis's wardrobe?
I don't think anybody can probably keep up with Elvis's wardrobe. He knew how to dress.
Can you remember?
He loved fur.
Can you remember this coat? Can you remember the clothes?
Yeah. I have the leather outfit, Northwich leather. That actually, it's interesting. I believe this was maybe right before New Year's Eve. My grandfather, unfortunately, had just passed away, so I was a little sad. I used to get a lot of flack. People would go, you don't look happy in your pictures. You're not smiling. And I said, well, you're being caught off guard. You're not always walking around expecting paparazzi, but I was sad because my grandfather was passing away. But that was on the way to my grandfather's funeral, actually.
Right, okay. Now you mentioned North Beach leathers.
Yeah.
So this is in California, this is where all the rock stars went in the 70s to get kitted out. And if you watch old videos, and once you start noticing it, you'll think, they've been to North Beach. So did you go with Elvis?
No, I think this was when Elvis was doing a CBS special that they kind of sprung in the last minute. And he sent my sister and I shopping in Los Angeles. And I believe this is one of the outfits I picked out, and another outfit I picked out just to wear on tour. And he surprised me when he introduced me that other outfit, which I didn't know about.
Now we've got you, so there you are arriving places. Now we've got you, so this is after, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building. Here you are leaving. They're easy to tell because Elvis has still got the jumpsuit on. But that must have been, so you're one of the few people who never heard, ladies and gentlemen, Elvis has left the building because you were in the car with him.
Yeah.
Didn't that nearly get you into trouble one night, the first night? Did you leave a bit early?
Yes. When I was first on Elvis, I think I flew into Anaheim, California. Elvis had invited me on tour with him. And, I was told they had me sit on the stage off behind the sound men. And I was told when Elvis starts singing Can't Help Falling in Love with You for me to leave, to make it in the car because they're going to get him off the stage very quickly. So when I heard Elvis start singing, I was watching his show and everything, and I stood up and I heard a voice say, stay. And I looked and he was quickly pointed at me, and I sat back down real quick. I was like, did anybody just see that? What I saw, what I heard? And I sat there for a few minutes and I was getting nervous, and finally, I made it into the car. And when he got in the car, he was asking, he said, did you see the end of the show? And I said, no. And he got a little upset, and he said, make sure she sees the end of the show next. And the next night, when he performed, sure enough, he wanted me to see all these fabulous karate moves that he would do at the end of his shows. And so I stayed, because I saw that, and I said, that's what that was all about. Yeah.
And when you're in the car here, is he saying, great show, or I wasn't so good on the second number, or do you remember what the conversation was like?
Yes, I don't know.
In the cars?
People read a lot, certain ones. I love that shot. He was always tired. I mean, you catch people, they would catch Elvis and not the most flattering sometimes, or he looks. And I said, he just performed. He did a show. He doesn't have the pompadour. His hair is down. He says, and tired. I got asked about that one a lot. They're always going, what has he got in his hand? Is it a cell phone? Is it something? I know they didn't have that back then. I wish I could remember what he had in his hand there, but I don't. But yeah, this, I mean,
I just
I
wondered
was always,
if he never did, in his eyes, he never did the perfect show. He was always waiting for the next one. Because he was you can tell when you watch That's the Way It Is, you can tell that Elvis is the musical director. He's working the band. And he was very proud of his live performances, wasn't he?
oh, he was, and he always wanted to give his best. And you know, during our time together, he did. Even when there were a lot of little injuries that I witnessed that he had, and when he would do those karate stances, he would pull a hamstring muscle in his leg, and that would really hurt him. Sometimes he'd have a massage in the back, and he did have glaucoma, the glare from the lights, the perspiration and everything would get in his eyes. A lot of times I would put a washcloth on his eyes after some shows. But you know, I thought he did phenomenal. He did a lot of shows and walked out on that stage, and sometimes, you know, not feeling 100% up to par, but he always gave his best because he cared so deeply for the fans to get enjoyed. You know, if a wrong note was hit on stage, he'd stop, start over, and do all that, just a perfectionist with that.
Do you remember the first time you heard that famous CC Rider intro and he walked out on stage and started singing? You're thinking, wow, that's my guy.
Yeah. Well, and it was amazing because he would throw the scarves out, and some of these women, I was really concerned that someone would get hurt because they would climb, boy, they do almost anything to get those scarves. You can't blame them, but especially up in the rafters or behind, you know. And, so it was a little scary sometimes watching, but he was just phenomenal to watch, just a phenomenal entertainer. You know. And I feel for people who didn't get to see him perform live, but I sat through many shows, and just you know, and I'd always root for him to hit certain notes and certain songs, and but he gave his best.
Now finally you get a decent holiday to Hawaii in, I think, March 1977, but it's not a romantic couple on holiday. Well, it is a romantic couple on holiday, but there's a couple of friends who go with you, isn't there?
Oh yes, yeah, I was sitting in Graceland with him. This was late February, and he started talking about redecorating his home. And I remember he said, Graceland should come alive again. And he said, he was talking about redoing the upstairs, and he goes, and then comes the monstrous task of downstairs. And he said, I want to be colors you like too. And I was thinking green, not forgetting the jungle room was green, but I said, well, green would be nice, maybe an aquarium and all this. And he asked me, there's a bathroom upstairs, another bathroom off of his office. And he asked me what colors I would like. And I said, well, turquoise and white would be nice. And he goes, okay. And then after that, he starts asking me if I'd ever been to Hawaii. And I said, no. He said, I'd really like to go here. So we ended up going to Hawaii, and we left on my sister's birthday, and both my sisters went, and it was just quite a large entourage of people. There were about 28 other people that went along, which how generous he was. Yeah, but I was just going to come back to the bathroom. When we returned from that trip, I was just stunned. That bathroom was redecorated in turquoise and white.
Wow.
Yeah.
So, but you didn't all stay in the same place. We've got some pictures of you in Hawaii. And do you remember the towering beach hut? Was that to protect him from the sun, or was that because he wasn't really sure whether he wanted to be fully recognized? Were you on a very private beach?
I think it was a combination, yeah. Yeah, this beach was private, but we stayed at the Hilton, the Rainbow Hawaiian Hilton. We were in Oahu. And my sister and I were joking with him about, you know, why don't you put on a wig and come downstairs and all this? He goes, I can't do that, or I didn't want to do it. But finally he decided to rent this house on the other side of the island. And yeah, it was just me. It was me and my sisters and his cousin and his cousin's wife that stayed there in the house with him. Other people were still back and they had to travel back and forth to the hotel. But he wore, sometimes it's funny, I look back and
we'd love to know what was happening here. Someone's been fraud. Is this you or your sister?
That's my sister, Rosemary. Yeah, we were actually at the first house we were looking at that he was thinking about renting. And I remember my sister was sitting on the floor, I was sitting on the couch, and Elvis was sitting over here, and he just kind of cut his eyes over at her every once in a while. And my sister he loved a joke with my sister Rosemary. And he kept cutting his eyes over at him, and I don't know what, all I know is he stood up to walk and then he just pounced on him. And so her leg went up in the air, so it was just a funny moment. The first house he was considering renting.
This one here I love because you look so relaxed. It's such a loving couple. You've got your arms on his leg, and this is a lovely photograph. Is this your favourite? Do you have a favourite, Elvis? A new photo?
Probably. I really like that one. Well, it's hard. I'm just so happy that we have a lot of these. Because I didn't want to intrude on his privacy. I didn't have a camera. I didn't always, and I find like my sister took that photo actually. But we brought along a Polaroid camera when we went to Hawaii, and his road manager started taking pictures. I felt a little more comfortable to just get up and take some pictures. Do I wish I had more? Absolutely. And I'm just glad that some of these were taken, but it makes me sad that I didn't get to, because you don't get to see him necessarily laughing, you don't get to see the fun he was having by having more pictures, or too bad no one videoed.
Did your family own a VCR video camcorder back then?
I think we did.
Did Elvis have one?
He may have, but no one brought, wouldn't that have been fantastic if someone had brought.
Imagine at Graceland if there's some home footage somewhere with you on it.
I wish there was. But I don't remember seeing anyone pull one out there. I just remember that people were taking just the still shots. But yeah, I was super happy. I don't know who brought the clothes or who picked out the clothes for this, but I remember cutting the sleeves off of this jumpsuit that was warm. And I even went shopping and bought him a shorter sleeve shirt because I think he had one. I cut them. I still don't know who packed for him. Yeah.
And when you went shopping, didn't you miss out on touch football?
Yeah, that really bothered me. I had no idea. My sisters and I, when I went to get Elvis another shirt, and we weren't gone too long, but when we came back, Elvis had been playing a game of touch football. You may have seen some of the pictures where he was laughing and seemed to be having a good time there. But I missed that. That really bothered me. We didn't get to see that. Yeah.
Can you remember on that holiday, or maybe going down to dinner with Elvis, just thinking, I'm young and I'm going out with the most famous man in the world. Can you remember the excitement in your heart, the pounding?
Oh, sure, yeah. When we first got there, though, he wanted to stay in and read. This was Elvis again, and he sent me downstairs to go shopping with my sisters. This was in the hotel we were at. And, but then he would turn and do other things. We had him singing, we had him go out on the balcony, and I think he started singing Blue Hawaii from the balcony. And we would cut up with him and get him. And one time, I think we were trying to make up, back then you had to place a collect call. We placed a collect call to my parents after we landed in Hawaii. I remember we were trying to tell the operator, and Elvis takes the phone and he goes, "This is Elvis Presley." And he starts singing. They're like, "Yeah, right," and he starts singing to the woman on the I put the call through to the number. So that was funny.
I bet it worked.
But it was nice to see him relax, and he did enjoy himself. We went to the Polynesian Cultural Center and watched a lot of the Hawaiian acts and everything. So it was good for him, but unfortunately that trip was cut short because some sand blew in his eye, scratched his cornea. So we had to leave. We were there maybe 10 days, and we went back to Memphis, and an eye doctor came in, and I stayed and put cream in his eyes overnight and for a couple of nights, and his eye healed, but that's too bad. We had to cut that trip short, but he had a good time.
And I guess he was 41, 42 at the time, so he's going into middle age. You probably don't want to answer this question, Ginger, but could Elvis be grumpy?
Yes. He did have a quick temper. There were some incidents, unfortunately, I wrote about, to be honest, in trying to understand this beautiful, complex man that had come into my life. And when you love somebody, you try to understand. And I stood up to Elvis at times, which I think he didn't like too much, but it was all in trying to help him. And I think other people didn't understand. There were some incidents I wrote about where I had left the house over certain events, and I think some of the guys may have thought, "Oh, she doesn't want to be there, she doesn't," and they had no idea what was going on behind closed doors, and no one ever asked. So I was just kind of trying to figure things out on my own and trying to help him in the way that I knew then, and trying to help him. And I'm proud for doing a lot of that.
The Beatles said no one understands what we went through apart from the other three Beatles. And Elvis didn't really have anyone to share it with from the mid-50s up until 77, did he? No one else was like Elvis Presley. I mean, Ricky Nelson had quite a lot of hits. They weren't living Elvis's life, were they?
It's just it's amazing how original he really was, how unique just as a person. And he was always thirsty for knowledge, and we would be on the road and he would ask them, he would have somebody spell a word for him, or he would try to spell a word and give the definition. He's always wanting to learn and grow. And you know, that was admirable. And I thought he was very bright in many ways, in some ways, taking care of himself health-wise, not so bright. But you know, I always had high hopes that I could help him more in the future, and just had to figure out what to do. But I am proud of things that I did, if he may not have understood, or others around him. But you know, certain behaviors sometimes when incidents happen, you have to stand up to that and say, this isn't mine, or this isn't. And he had gotten away. You know, Elvis was spoiled, and he'd gotten away with some things for a long time. So
nobody wanted to say no to Elvis.
I think you know, a lot of people were, and I risked he could have broken off with me early on. He could have with certain things that had happened. But you know, it was my way in trying to help him.
Now we're going to take a break, but before we do, every lady in the audience would like to know when you first kissed Elvis, when you first kissed the king of rock and roll, the most handsome man in the world. Was it like an MGM movie kiss? Did you hear music, or was it just kind of an average guy kissing you?
Oh, no, nothing average about it. No, good kisser.
Elvis was a good kisser. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in the second half. Could you give Ginger a round of applause? Some of the merchandise up the back. Then we're going to do the questions and answers, which you can text to this number here, and we will do some of those, which will be fun because I'll be reading them off a card and I'm completely dyslexic. So it's going to be entertaining. And we'll be back with Ginger. We're just off to get a little drink, and we'll see you in 20 minutes' time. Ginger Alden, ladies and gentlemen.